Whoosh.
Ah, oh, it's good.
They
Oh,
have
I can
two.
see it now. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I think, yes, we are live streaming on YouTube. Hello, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, everyone. We are all around the world. I first have to apologize to our participant and also people waiting for us on the YouTube. Sorry for a little bit late because I clicked the wrong account, so I can have difficult to go live streaming online. But finally, I realized I make some mistake. But well, happy solstice. Hello, everyone. Hi, Julia. Hi, Jolie. Hi,
Hello,
Tina.
Rod.
How are you?
Good to see you all again.
Yeah,
Very
I
happy
think,
to be here.
yeah, thank you for joining us. And well, because we run the our regular Mundane astrology discussion once a month in the evening time. But for every Ingress and the equinox, I would like to expand it a little bit, to see the a little bit of focus on the Asia Pacific area. And also today we're quite lucky we have Jolie to join us, so we can get some information from US. But
Just a little
I know
bit.
Jody, yeah, a little bit. But Jody, I have to say, Jody is a what? A global citizen. Global citizen, shipping everywhere. So she had a connection to all the continental. I should say that. I'm not. Yeah. So I think she can bring us a very different insight. Well, today's program, I think we will start with Julia because Julia bring us a very interesting topic about the lunar standstill. And then we will go to look at what happened in Syria. And if Benson join us on time, we will talk about Hong Kong, China. If not, we will focus on China and Taiwan. All right. So let me make Julia co-host first, and then okay, Julia. So you can now
Okay.
share.
So, yes, I'm going to talk about the lunar standstill, but also, let me just, hang on. Can you see my pointer, maybe?
Yes,
Can you
Yes.
now.
see that? Okay, great. So, but also, putting in some other things that are, I suppose, more general for mundane, from a mundane perspective, as opposed to focusing so much on Australia. But I have got, a few highlights for what's happening in Australia and stuff. So, um, of course, we've all looked at the solstice chart depending on, where we are in the world. This is just the generic one, let's say, with zero Aries rising. And we all know the main signatures for that, which is the main thing is, I think, is the sun, as it has been doing in the last few ingresses, has been squaring Pluto. Now it's squaring the nodes, and that will continue now into 2025 as Neptune sort of hovers around 0 point of Aries with Saturn. So it's a big signature now to have the nodes and the sun squaring at cardinal ingress. Oh, sorry, the nodes only for this one and the Aries ingress really, but Neptune. And these two T squares, a moon in Virgo opposite Saturn with Jupiter, at the point there, I think is really interesting. Of course, Mars opposite not Mars retrograde opposite Pluto. Many people have talked about all those things, I think, about this ingress. But I just wanted to point out the midpoints to the sun, which is again very much connected to Neptune and the nodes, but also Uranus and Mars. And it's interesting, the closest aspect in this solstice chart is Mars opposite Ceres. So, Mars retrograde opposite Ceres and Pluto, of course, is very, I don't think the hardship's going away very quickly. Do you know what I mean? The hardships for many of us around the planet trying to survive, live with the expense of everything, and all those suffering around the world. If we remember, Ceres all year, or most of the year since after the Aries ingress, has been extremely out of bounds and very close to Pluto now. They're both hovering at sort of the end of, around the end of, 23 degrees of declination. So they're kind of at the extremes, and it's not unusual, but these two, let's say, dwarf planets together are the ones that are the most elliptical. So it's almost like the two sort of unruly kind of elliptical planets are in the same place in a sense. And then if we put the dial to Uranus, we can see that Uranus is the midpoint for the Mars Ceres and the mutable square that's going on. So, I mean, this is really interesting with what's happening with the drones in America, you know, the drone action all over the East Coast in a sense, because, you know, maybe the signature in the solstice chart might not really show Uranus being so involved, but it does as a midpoint. And I think when we think about, again, Neptune, Sun, and all this mutable energy as well, Jupiter, you know, what is the truth? What do we believe? Saturn in Pisces, we've known that story for a while. You know, what is going on? I mean, does anyone really know? Do we really know anything that's going on? We're just kind of, I think what this shows is that, you know, we're always surprised about stuff more and more. Do you know what I mean? About what's happening and how and, you know, why it happens. So again, you know, Jupiter in Gemini, Saturn in Pisces, you know, now the moon in Virgo joins them for this T-square. And, you know, the moon in Virgo, you know, is going to sort some stuff out, perhaps. Do you know what I mean? Clear up some of this confusion and chaos. Or, well, that is the promise of a Virgo moon. Let's see. And in Australia, the chart set for Canberra for the solstice is we have the sun on the descendant, and, you know, Chiron on the midheaven. And that was a signature. And I think that's the same for the Aries ingress, right? Like we've talked about that before, or, you know, earlier in the year. Yeah, as I said, you know, it's a signature for the sun to be very much involved with Neptune over, let's say, the next year and into 2026. So, you know, how much of things will clear up. Once Saturn joins Neptune, perhaps we'll get more sort of grounding about what's really going on behind the scenes. But at this stage, I think there's so much going on that we really are not sure about, for sure. And in Australia, it's what's just happened in the last week, last weekend, in a sense, was our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, in November asked for the prisoners from the Bali Nine. I don't know if you remember the Bali Nine from Indonesia that were arrested or jailed for smuggling heroin, like a huge amount of it. Two of the ringleaders were executed in 2015. One died in prison, and the other six have now just come back and been released in Australia. It was said that they were coming back to prison here, like as an exchange of prisoners, but they were released. They're actually free now. So this is really quite significant. And if we look back at the time that they were sentenced it was February 2006. So as we know, that is very much about the eclipse cycles going on. If we can see the nodal axis is, you know, has returned. We've got the sun very close to the Pluto aspect here. And we've got the sun of that back in 2006 being squared by Uranus. So, you know, some big sort of, principles of freedom, especially with Uranus and the sun. And also look at Mars. This is Mars retrograde right on the Saturn there. So anyway, I think, you know, things do change, let's say, things that we don't expect to change that actually then in the end, you know, become, you know, something else. And for these guys, thank goodness, in a sense. Anyway, it brings up all those ideas of, I mean, all those moral, you know, thinking about, you know, executions anyway, doesn't it? Like, and should they still happen in the world and that kind of thing. So, so anyway, that's good to see. Now, some of you might know this, but we also, back on the 4th of December, we had legislation passed that would prevent or ban under 16-year-olds using social media, right? And the date for that, I don't have the exact time, but just 12 p.m. that day, we know Mercury retrograde opposite Jupiter in Gemini. And I mean, in the end, what a signature that is for the youth, for the information that they're, able to connect to, or just, their social life. Gemini, Jupiter in Gemini in detriment is like, no, you're not going to get it. I really don't know how they're going to police it all yet, or, how that's going to work, but it's super interesting in that sense. And of course, Mars in Leo, representing youth, is just stationing retrograde here. So anyway, these are the few kind of major sort of issues that have happened in Australia of late. And of course, these all, connect to the solstice chart, because the solstice chart is alive, let's say, a few months before, before the actual event this weekend, in a sense. And this is now the 4th of December. And as you know, some of you know, I love using the geodetic maps to look at things. And this is the Jupiter Mercury going straight through Canberra as that legislation was passed, right? So if, for those that don't know, geodetic maps set like a fixed map of the zodiac on starting at 0 degrees of Aries, of course, at Greenwich. And then it's kind of 30 degrees around the planet. And it's really, really interesting to look at, because I've been looking at it for a while and I keep finding, these amazing things and connections. And then just the other day, new anti-protest laws have been passed in Victoria. So if we go to protest against something, we're not allowed to do this, and this. I don't even know. I have been too scared to look. What are they stopping us from doing now? And the interesting thing is, of course, Jupiter is like 1659 or 16 degrees of Sagittarius at the moment. And the coordinates of Melbourne, or what we call the geodetic equivalent, because every place on the planet has a zodiac reference, right? An MC, an ascendant, which of course is, the opposite sign for descendant, and so on. So it's a fixed map, but it really, really, I just find it so fascinating that it is so spot on many, many times. And so 17 Sagittarius is the ascendant of Melbourne, which is the capital of Victoria, right? So I've just added the ACG map, and I'm sure that you all have looked at this already for the solstice, but it's interesting that the sun does come through Australia here on the descendant, as the chart showed before. The Bali 9, we have Bali just through here where Saturn is on the MC, and what's crossing it? Jupiter is crossing. So the Saturn-Jupiter square and the moon are all over Bali, right? Where, again, we've seen these prisoners sort of come out and find their freedom. We also just recently had 2 females, again, this is Mercury now going through Thailand, who died after drinking, what was it? I don't know, like ethanol, or no, some poisonous drink that they use in bars instead of alcohol, like instead of real alcohol. So that's interesting. That goes through there. As we know, the freedom in Syria, and we've got Neptune going right through that area. Again, you guys are going to talk about it, but I love this, the Uranus going right through, as I talked about Uranus going right over the east coast of the USA, right? And we've got, sky action, drones, no one knows what's going on there. So anyway, there's a lot more there, but I'll keep going. And then this is the geodetic map of the solstice, and again we've got Jupiter going through here, Mercury's moved off. If we remember last week, there was an earthquake in Vanuatu, and the sun was right through this area at the time. And Chiron is still over Washington with Eris, and of course we've got the wild card Trump still, coming in. And of course, USA is having their Chiron return. So Chiron is on Washington's, let's say, ascendant in the geodetic map, okay? Venus is there through Syria as well. So, when we use ACG maps, always have a look at the geodetic map, because again, it gives you another sort of backup of information as well. So this is the earthquake that happened on that, whatever day it was, the 17th. And there's the sun, like right through there, and there's the map of where it happened. I mean, it's right spot on. And, the sun, I can't remember what degree it was. Well, it's only a few days ago, 25 degrees of Sagittarius or something. So again, keeping an eye on that. Now, many of us are aware, of course, that we are in what's called the major lunar standstill. And that is, I think that's really quite significant for the times that we are in the sense of, I'll explain as I go, but the lunar standstill means that every month, twice a month, the moon is going out to its extremes, right? And these extremes happen in the signs of Sagittarius, the end of Sagittarius and the beginning of Capricorn, and the end of Gemini and the beginning of Cancer. So very much in that cardinal extremes where we have the solstices. The lunastice happens as well. And this happens only every 18.5 years. And the minor lunar standstill happens every half time, so every 9 years, right? So anyway, well, hang on, let me just show that. So this is the lunar standstill here as a declination map. And the moon started going out of bounds twice a month at like mid-2020, which is really, really interesting. And those of us that looked into the decade of 2020s were always going like 2025, is pretty full on, because this is the peak of this time, right? This is the peak of this time, and the peak is around March. But the interesting thing that's just happened is that we've had the full moon just last weekend, right, at 23 Sagittarius, and it's the only one there's another one that's close to a full moon, or I think the next full moon is still, getting out there as well. But if we all remember, or if we think about all the ancient civilizations that put standing stones, in sacred sites, they weren't just always for the sun, they were also for the moon and for these moon extremes, right? So if you've got a garden, like I've actually positioned something, for this because, if you remember looking out at the full moon, if your skies were clear, it's like, wow, the moon is way out from what you remember it rising around the east, left or right to the east. It's way off kilter. And this is how far east this last moon was. I mean, sorry, how far north it was from east. Okay. So this is in the northern hemisphere, the most extreme. And also because it's the solstice, the moon is also 5 degrees, extreme from the sun's ecliptic line, which is this yellow one. So, and then this is from the southern hemisphere where we have east, and then again, the moon also north of east. So anyway, it's something to keep looking at, let's say, all right? If you're interested in making some standing stones for in your backyard or whatever. And then this is the minor lunar standstill, which peaked in around early 2016. Okay, so we're kind of in the opposite time of that. And let's say the astronomy and the technicalities of the lunar standstills are that the minor standstills will happen when the nodes are in Capricorn and Cancer, and the major lunar standstills will happen when the nodes are where they are now, Aries and Libra, right, at near the 0 points. Again, the cardinal extremes. And I think this just really represents how important these cardinal points are. Do you know what I mean? Like, to have these things happening, the sun's extremes, the moon's extremes. And so if we look at the the last full moon just last week. And we can see at the end here, I mean, again, this is so, as you saw in the declination map, there's only minutes that differentiate, the extreme, right? So they're not, minutes of arc, they're not degrees, they're minutes of arc. And if we count down to the end, this is the only one that's a full moon. This one on the 12th January is again close because it's a gibbous moon. I can't remember what degree it is, but just before the full moon, the extreme of the moon is happening again. So also visible. That's the whole thing about the full moon. We can see the extreme, right? Like when it's near a new moon or a balsamic moon, we won't be able to see that moon, right? So then as we go down, this is the most extreme one, okay? But it is a disseminating moon. Again, we're not seeing it, and it's only hours after the equinox of 2022. So I think this just really highlights the extremities that we are living through in a way, right? With everything else going on, like everything else is going on, of course, as well. But this is, to me, very significant for let's say this out of bounds energy of the moon, like twice a month, right? So keep an ie on that. I think that's super significant. And then I've just added this because it's interesting, not many people are aware of this. So for you guys in the Northern Hemisphere, because the moon is, let's say last week it was in Gemini, it is the highest that it will be, right? It's the highest moon you'll ever see, really, okay? But for us in the South, it's the lowest moon we will ever see. Like I was talking to some friends that were, in Northern Queensland at last weekend's new moon, full moon. And I'm going, oh, I can't see the moon. And it was like so left of center or, left of east that I had to sort of get up and walk around and behind the trees. And it was so low. Right? It was so low. So, the other extreme would happen for you guys, right? When the full moon is close to Sagittarius, it will be very low, or Capricorn is going to be very low in your sky. So just things to notice, and then understand how that is kind of happening in our astrology charts, let's say. The other thing I want to kind of bring up, and I wrote about this in Time Lords magazine, is that, or the CIA's Time Lords magazine, which Keenan is part of, and a few others, and many others, is so many crossings of the 0 point. Again, the nodal axis crossing, depending if you're using true or mean nodes. The Venus retrograde cycle crosses this now in March and April. Mercury retrograde also crossing this point 3 times. Of course, as we know, Neptune and Saturn will cross this point, and Ceres. So what a hotspot, in that sense of the Ouroboros kind of signature of the nodes there, the beginning and the end. So much potential for birthing new things, but also, the chaos of what we're in between. And something that I said at a CIA thing earlier today was we're also moving from the year of the dragon to the year of the snake, right? Which I think is really interesting in the sense of this 0 point crossing representing with the nodes, the dragon's head and the dragon's tail as we go from a dragon to a snake. And again, the mid-January is a very sort of hot time with the Mars opposite the sun, peak of Mars. But as the nodes cross 0, are at 0 Aries, like you would, the moon is out of bounds here. Where is he? Down at just before its peak to that extreme. Venus is at maximum elongation. And for those of you that know what a draconic chart is, like we might do it with our own natal astrology, where we change the zodiac to begin with where the North Node at 0 Aries, and then we get kind of a new look at our own astrology chart. Well, we could look at this chart for the whole world, like as a mundane map for the next 18 and a half years. I haven't looked at the last one in a sense to sort of, do you know what I mean? Like we look at a Jupiter Saturn cycle and how it represents the next 20 years. I mean, we could do this, although I didn't get a chance to look at the last one, right? Which was around, 2006, right? And yes, the year of the wood snake that begins, again, I just think that's really quite symbolic of, somehow I feel as though we're reaching a peak in these next few months of whatever, all this kind of energy that's going on, and things might begin to present them, again, not in a hurry. Like 2025 is quite a, volatile year in the sense of Neptune going back and forward, Saturn going back and forward, as we know. But again, this introduction here is again quite significant. Just to add the Venus star points, I think it's really interesting that the last Venus star point was the Gemini star point, just around when we guys met in Istanbul, Rod and Kenan. And then the next one is the retrograde in Aries. But what I find really interesting is that the Venus stations retrograde on the 2nd of March at 11 Aries for her next loop. And Mars has just stationed direct only 6 days before, or a week before. So therefore their station periods are pretty much overlapping, and it's almost like the baton's being passed. Do you know what I mean? Like, okay, your time to do it. And it's also that change of Mars and Venus being the ruler of the nodes, also changing in and around that time, although the nodal shift is a bit earlier. So keeping an eye on the retrogrades of, again, these two. I've got a bit more to say. Oh, no, they've got more to say on that. Yes, here it is. And Rod, I remember your Mundane conference that we did online just back in, when was it, November?
November, yes.
Talked about the Mars-Venus cycles, and just something to remember is that Mars and Venus to be retrograde in the same area of the chart doesn't happen all the time, right? Like I'm talking about Leo back to Cancer, or Aries, right? So we need the star point happening in Aries. So a full Mars cycle is 15 years and then 17 years. So it takes 2 Mars cycles and 8 full, and is it 8? No, it's 4 Venus cycles to be in loop with Mars retrograde cycle, so that their synodic cycles are kind of doing the same thing that they did back in these years. So 2025, 1993, 1961, 1929. Interesting when we think about 1929, what happened, financially.
Oh, yes.
1961, again, I did more in that loop, but I can't remember everything. But I think that's just after Kennedy got elected in the US. And again, you might be thinking a lot of other things. So again, we're going back to a similar cycle that was happening back then, which is really interesting. And again, I think that might present itself more to us. And just something that I saw the other day, again, the Venus star has 5 points, and they're repeated in one place as a retrograde every year, but in between, it's pretty much a 4-year cycle and then an 8-year cycle in every point. Okay, so it's really easy to sort of track and follow. But when I put it, Olga Morales did a talk for the CIA recently on using the decans and astrology and the stock market. And then I thought, I'll put the Venus star on there. And every decan, this is the Ptolemaic decans, is ruled by Mars.
Whoa.
I know. So, I mean, you could put the tarot cards together, the 2 of Wands, the what's that, the 9 of Wands, the what's that, the 7 of Wands. So a lot of wands, a lot of war. 5 of Cups, a lot of suffering, and the 3 of Pentacles. Just have a think about that, like as in how symbolic that is to the state of the world, and how many, wars are going on, and, just things happening. And just think, sometime into the future, They will be all in Jupiter because Venus star points move backwards. This point here, the Leo point that was retrograde in 2003 in August, in 2027, it moves for the first time, it moves to the Jupiter decan. The others will take a long time to move to Jupiter decans, but in sometime into the future, all the Venus star points will be in the Jupiter decan. So I think that's interesting. Anyway, I just wanted to add that. And then, yeah, just looking at the Mars and Venus cycles again coming together. I think that's also highly significant because they're overlapping with their stationary periods. And of course, what does Venus represent? What does Mars represent? It's fighting for our values. And if we're doing it, everyone else is doing it. And then that sort of coming together of the Pisces impulse, represented by the planets moving out of Pisces, and the planets moving back into, from Aries to Pisces. We've got this kind of such a meeting point of collective ideals and the willpower of the individual, that might give us sort of motivation to, let's say, be more involved with what's going on or what have you. And I did that one already. Why did I do twice? And then just, foreseeing the Aries ingress for 2025, I looked back and I wrote about this in Time Lords to see Mercury and Venus very close in, retrograde together at this close to the Aries ingress. Very rare. Very, very rare. I'll just tell you that much. I found, around the Aries point or the, Aries ingress, Mercury retrograde back in Pisces, or they've swapped around, but not both of them together at this sort of balsamic phase, moving backwards. Okay, so I think that's really interesting. And then just days after the, hours after this ingress, we have the peak of the lunar standstill, right? The moon at its most, by a few minutes, but still, that's significant as well. So that's it from me, guys. I just would usher you to look at the Time Lords magazine. Again, Keenan's involved. Anyone else that wants to be involved writing articles, we just launched it a few weeks ago, and I urge you to take a look. And for anyone else that's interested in what the CIA is doing, we always have a membership sale during the solstice. So go on our website and have a look. We've got incredible teachers and webinars and a huge library that we've been collecting from 2016 that is accessible, plus 20 webinars per year. So if you want to learn more, go for it. Okay. So
Thank you, Julia. Thank you.
Stuff. My pleasure.
Thank you. I really enjoy as an astronomy fan. I really enjoy always put the sky map in, and we just like, oh yes, why we didn't notice that? Yes, it's true that for especially when you say moon is stand very high in north hemisphere, but instead for the south hemisphere they are extremely low. Like for example, look at the sun. The sun in the north hemisphere in couple days time for London, it would be only 15 degree, 15 degree above horizon.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
This would be like for like a Kina or Benson, because you never see things like this when you are in Hong Kong and Turkey. If you were in London, you would think, why the sun is so low?
Yeah.
And also, don't worry. If you are in London, you are not going to see the sun.
The sun anyway.
Jolly know that. Jolly living in England. Jolly know that. Sun? What is that?
Yeah. So we had the extreme. The sun's high, but the moon was so low, right?
Yes.
Just keeping aware of that. I mean, we did a webinar with Luis Ribeiro from Portugal and Gemini Brett just recently, because we've been looking at the just looking at how things are different from the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, and the way that astrology does not interpret any of that differently. And we're not saying that we should change signs or anything like that. It's just well, there's high signs in the southern
Yeah,
hemisphere, like, you know,
yeah,
the opposite in, you know, so and just understanding that. So that's all on the CIA website. So I encourage you all to go and have a look at it.
definitely, definitely. I
Right?
think when we talk to the sky, sky will talk to us. Okay,
Yes.
so now I'm going to move to the Middle East. Let's focus on because Julia just mentioned about the 4th of December. How many things happened that time?
What
I
else?
think I
What
I will
else?
invite everyone, Benson, Keenan, and Jody. You can start to turn on your microphone because in this session we will have a lot of discussion. All right, because I think with the first, I think that same day, I think the big news was coming out first in Australia was like the ban to use the social media for teenagers. I was like, oh, finally someone doing something. To be honest, the people are not happy, but I'm not parents, but I can see how we've been imprisoned of the
Yeah.
social media. And then our youngest, they always stick the phone in front of their face. And then I think it is a good regulation from my point of view. And, maybe people are disagree. That's all right. But, and then very soon we have the Luigi Mangione gunned down the CEO in the United States. I have to say that is a historical moment. To be honest, I'm not encourage violence or kill someone just for the revenge or injustice.
Yeah.
But as Mars is stationary that time, on the Sibley Charles North Node, that is awakening, right? Okay,
Yeah.
but very
Let's
soon.
wait for March now when Venus and Mars cross their stations.
Oh yes, yes, and then Syria. You can't believe that. But maybe a couple months ago, how could you believe that Assad would just lost his power?
Yeah.
Jolie,
Yeah.
you are mute. You can turn on. We can have conversation.
I found that was an extraordinary week. We also had Macron in France going through troubles, and I mean, like, wow, what a week. The fall of the
German the
Assad,
same.
yeah, the fall of the Assad regime, though, was really striking in its speed. It was like,
Yes.
you know, as you said, people couldn't have imagined it happening quite so quickly. It was clear that Russia and Iran were thinking, okay, well, we know when to cut our losses. So there was no point in going in and trying to prop it up any further. But I do find this whole kind of weird slippery slope that we're on. So the terrorists who were terrorists are now in power. They're not terrorists anymore. And so and so this whole thing of like Caitlin Johnston, who's a prominent Australian writer, she talks about how she has a beautiful post on get it straight. This is a terrorist. This is no longer a terrorist, but this person is a terrorist due to that terrorist action. But this terrorist action, it does not produce a terrorist. Extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary.
Wow. Well, Neptune's going through there, isn't it? For this,
Yeah. Yeah, and what is right? What is wrong? What is right? Who is terrorist? And who is the martyr? Who is the sacrifice one? This like everyone can play their role. Even Assad can say, "I'm the victim of the terrorist action." So, how about let's quick look on the field chart related to Syria, and Keenan, feel free to jump in. And Keenan, have you prepared anything? If you have,
yes, I prepared lots of things.
That's you. I want that you lead. If you prepare anything, I'm quite happy to let you lead.
Okay.
and Julia, feel free to jump in. All right. Okay.
And now, here's my slides. Okay. Can you see?
Yes, we can see it.
And hello, everyone. Thank you again. And it's so valuable to come together again. Sending lots of love to all of you, dear Julia, Jolie, Benson, and Rod. My special thanks, my dear cousin Rod. And you know that what an interesting year we're stepping into, isn't it? So everything seems to be moving forward and then backward, switching places. Planets will enter a sign, then change their minds and decide to retrograde, saying, let me linger a little longer in this sign. And it's almost like living through a teaser. And it feels as though we are getting a preview of what's to come in 2026, I think, from my point of view, of course. And while we are already navigating the retrogrades of personal planets, collective planets will also be changing signs. And I believe this year will be a period of global transformation and pushing us all to adapt to the new. And we have some very interesting days ahead, of course, for the Capricorn Ingress. We are currently focusing on just a 3-month period. But looking at the chart, I think not just a T-square, I think a grand cross pattern is striking. A grand cross will form between Saturn and the Moon, Mercury, and Jupiter. You can see. And you know that grand crosses always symbolize great ambitions and significant struggles. In the coming period, we might observe leaders driven by major ambitions. And this pattern will occur in mutable signs. And I took a note that, you know, that Nicholas Champion mutable signs, they may be very adaptable, but may also, you know, exacerbate problems by evading them. Champion may interpretation avoiding problems, and I think this grand cross pattern might lead to a mindset of I've done it, let's move on to the next issue, and instead of dealing with real challenges. Leaders may appear to be taking action, but in reality no substantial progress might be made. And everyone could be struggling primarily for their own ambitions. And today I will focus on my own chart, own country, and we will examine these indicators through a country's chart. You know, these interpretations can actually be helpful for analyzing other countries as well. We are here as an Asian team. So Turkey will experience the Moon and Saturn opposition directly on the ascendant-descendant axis. In other words, these two planets will align along the horizontal horizon line. So maybe just look at this one. If you pay attention cartographically, the Moon and Saturn opposition directly on the ascendant-descendant axis and directly crosses over our country, specifically the capital, Ankara, you can see. And then to the north, Julia mentioned that it influences, of course, Russia, and to the south, it is really close to the Middle East. And if we open Syria's chart, we can see that this axis also passes very near to their region. And additionally, the ascendant Neptune line and Sun MC line pass through Syria. And the chart, there is already a Sun-Neptune square. And Syria can be identified as the location where this square becomes exact. And today we will discuss Syria, but first I'd like to provide some insights based on Turkey's chart. And just in summary, we can say this about the alignments. Saturn represents, you know, the state and institutions, while the Moon signifies the people and their needs. And the tension between these two directly aligns with our angular houses, indicating, I think, economic contraction. And there are motivational challenges. You know, motivation things is regarded as a symbol of our ascendant sign. So there are motivational challenges between the state and the people, and there's a sense of depression, not just economic depression, but also widespread hopelessness, hopelessness among the population, I think, and it represents the sorrow and grief of the people. And the Mercury Saturn square, maybe we can mention that, the Mercury and Saturn square suggest delays and difficulties on official matters. Mercury is in the ninth house, but maybe pointing the delays, in matters related to justice, legislation, and the judiciary. And additionally, Mercury is in opposition to Jupiter, spanning the third and ninth house axis. This indicates challenges in media, publishing, and broadcasting sectors, and also social media. Rod mentioned that. And I think these sectors, as well as questioning the country's beliefs and ideologies. Moreover, there will be difficulties in foreign trade and tourism, transportation, travel, education, communication, and legal matters. But on the opposite side, the chart features a trine between Venus and Jupiter. So this trine is also significant, which indicates some improvements maybe, and this could lead to significant developments in artistic fields. And since both planets are in air signs, so we can say that socializing might increase. However, Venus is placed in Aquarius in the sign cutting through the 12th house cusps, so which is somewhat concerning. So it suggests the potential for hidden or behind the scenes activities, I think. And Jupiter is in the third house, but with Gemini on the IC axis, so IC point, we could interpret Jupiter as influencing the fourth house using whole sign house method. And in this context, I think we might see improvements in the real estate market and housing conditions. Due to the large number of foreign nationals and significant migration to our country, that Turkey has become a kind of shelter, become a kind of sanctuary. So this situation has, of course, impacted the market, causing a sharp rise in rental prices. Guys, in Turkey, Turkish people are struggling significantly with housing. So the trine between Jupiter and Venus could also indicate improvements in real estate purchases. Of course, prices won't drop suddenly. This topic is especially related to the, Louis McWhirter cycles. And also, maybe we can mention that the lunar nodes and the Saturn and Jupiter phases. However, there might be improvements in interest rate policies regarding property purchases. We will wait and see. And meanwhile, with the shift in the dynamics of the civil war in Syria, citizens are expressing a desire to return to their country. Currently, guys, 3 million Syrian refugees reside in Turkey, my home country, which is a significant number, that. And maybe we mentioned that, Venus is in the 12th house and representing foreign nationals. And Jupiter associated with the 4th house signifies roots and ancestry. And maybe perhaps this aspect could bring some positive developments regarding these matters. However, we must not overlook the opposition between Mars and Pluto in the chart. As I mentioned, the dynamics of the civil war in Syria are changing. But maybe notice that I didn't say it's ending because I can't. Because the Mars retrograde and its opposition to Pluto suggests that the war will continue in a much more intense and sharp manner. So maybe we can, yes, this is what it is. You know that Turkey and Turkey Capricorn Ingress, if we overlay the Ingress chart onto Turkey's chart, Saturn comes directly to the midheaven. And Saturn has been here for quite some time, you know that. In fact, in our previous session, the esteemed Ashwin, maybe you remember that, Ashwin asked me about Saturn's effects. And I can say a lot about this because Turkey has faced significant challenges in governance over the past 10 years. But the difficulties intensified when Saturn began its transit through Pisces. For example, now we need to print new currency. You know that because the current dominations are no longer sufficient for transactions. So new banknotes will be printed. And however, there's another perspective. As you know, Saturn in the 10th house is considered a difficult placement, especially in natal charts. We interpret this as sign of challenges in life, particularly regarding career and goals. But we often tell individuals with this placement that they will experience delays in achieving their ambitions. Yet, despite the delays, they ultimately, succeed, right? So people with Saturn in the 10th house may love success, and through it comes late, but they do receive their rewards. And we can apply this idea to mundane astrology as well. For instance, the leadership and governance have struggled for years to gain recognition or approval for their actions. However, recently, the newly re-elected US President Donald Trump released a video praising Turkey's efforts and moves regarding the new developments in Syria. And Trump says that Turkey has done a good job. This is very interesting. And if the 10th house is about gaining recognition, okay, Saturn's presence here could symbolize that this acknowledgement has finally come, even if late. But is this necessarily a good thing? That's up for debate, as our priorities have been very different. And also, maybe I can mention that Saturn is actually disposed by Jupiter, and which is in Gemini, and which is in retrograde, which is located in Turkey's 12th house. So this makes me think everything might just be a performance, might just be an illusion. We will strongly feel the effects of the Saturn and Jupiter square this year, but there are also healing things. Specifically, Jupiter will move into Cancer. Yes, for the Capricorn Ingress, we are only evaluating the next 3 months, but I'd like to briefly touch on a few things, because when I was speaking at APAI, not just speaking, attendant at the APAI, as you know, there are monthly meetings with members, and during my section, I opened Turkey's chart. And dear Roy Gillette and dear our queen, Sharon Knight, Sharon both highlighted transit Jupiter's significance. Jupiter's significance, noting that this year is a year when Jupiter will align with our country's ascendant. And they emphasize this point during the. So, looking at the 12-year Jupiter cycle, I must admit that when Jupiter last came to this point 12 years ago, it wasn't a very promising time. I don't know if you remember, but it made headlines worldwide, so perhaps you might recall. Back then, Turkey experienced the Gezi Park protests in Taksim. Maybe you know that. People from all over the world, not all over the country, not world, people from all over the country organized marches and protests expressing their dissatisfaction with the government and its policies. And there were nationwide demonstrations calling for the government's resignation. During that period, Saturn was in Scorpio, located in our 5th house. Now Saturn is in Pisces, positioned in the 10th house, and it will soon move into Aries. But at 0 degrees Aries and 0 degrees Cancer, Saturn and Jupiter will form a square. And again, triggering the 10th and 1st houses in our country's chart. Let's see what happens this time. We are waiting. We will have more to discuss when we do a broadcast for the summer months, I think. So are you ready? Are you ready? Now I'm about to tell you something very, very important. Brace yourselves, because here's the thing. Isn't looking back at past years a great way to make predictions about the future? Yeah. So I thought, since this year we are entering winter with a Moon-Saturn opposition, okay, why not check which past years featured a similar opposition in the Capricorn Ingress charts? Friends, I went back to the 1800s, nothing. Then I delved into the 1700s. Between 1701 and 1776, the Capricorn Ingress occurred with a Moon-Saturn opposition. And here's the result. Since 1776, we haven't experienced a Moon-Saturn opposition in Capricorn Ingress charts. And this year will be the first time, and it will happen. It will happen again in 2027. And what could this mean for us? What do you think? In some years they formed an opposition by sign, but there hasn't been an exact degree based on opposition in any year. For example, in the Ingress chart, Capricorn Ingress chart of the year 2000, there is an opposition as well, but the Moon is in Scorpio and the Saturn is in Taurus. However, the Moon is at 13 degrees and the Saturn is at 25 degrees. So there's never been a perfect opposition. And just imagine during that year or 1700s, America was just gaining its independence. The Moon, symbolizes needs, and Saturn represents plans to meet those needs, sustainability, and in many cases, technology. The first thing that comes to mind use yet. Instead, wood, coal, and similar materials met energy needs. And this was also the era of the Industrial Revolution, wasn't it? So from the 1760s onwards, iron and steel production and the establishment of factories began. And this enabled population growth, because prior to that, there were challenges in survival, and there was famine or scarcity. And famine is directly related to the Moon-Saturn opposition and the inability to meet basic needs is precisely what this aspect describes. And during these years, wars of independence and revolutions were also taking place, but Saturn took center stage. And also, as you know, The Economist, the magazine, placed Saturn at the very top of its cover this year, the last issue. So what do you think could happen? We need to understand, I think, Saturn deeply. We need to understand deeply. So Europe seems heavily dependent on Russia for its energy and fuel needs. And the moon also symbolizes water and meaning potable resources. And if you noticed, almost all the wars in the Middle East occur in regions with abundant water sources. And yes, also oil is important, and Saturn certainly highlights this. But refining oil also requires a significant amount of water. So this makes me think of the climate crisis. And back in the 1700s, the world experienced a little ice age. And in this period, harsh weather conditions made it difficult to access fuel and raw materials, water, food, and maybe we can say that agriculture. So it seems we might face similar challenges again during this phase. And the 18 was also an age of enlightenment, a period of progress in science and art. Think of Isaac Newton, who lived during this time, and his contributions to nature and fundamental disciplines, industry and technology were at the forefront. So we might experience similar themes during this period. And I thought of writing headlines this way, as I believe these topics will shape our agendas. Saturn is primarily associated with sustainability, and Jupiter-Pluto square in the chart indicates that regional power struggles and conflicts over borders will likely intensify. And I believe the governments of countries, will increasingly focus on long-term planning and economic discipline, heavily influenced by Saturn's energy. Okay. Now let's get to our main topic, but time is a problem now or not?
No.
Okay.
No, it's okay. Go on.
Okay. Now let's get to our main topic. The title is the Syrian issue. Honestly, I have no idea what to say about this. Because everything is so uncertain. Jolie described masterfully, I think. This the terrorist is not a terrorist. Oh my God, it's a great story. Thank you for this narrative. So that's the reality. Everyone is talking, everyone is saying something, but we truly don't know what's actually happening there. So we can't fully understand it. But astrologically, I use Sirius 1st January 1944 chart, as I observed that it works well. Let's analyze it together. Please share your contributions. Let's see what might happen together. As you know, the Syrian war, civil war, began in 2011. And when we overlay the chart of Syria's founding with the chart of the civil wars start, we see very interesting placements. Saturn is in the first house and Mars is in the 6th house, conjunct the moon. And I'm not entirely sure about the transit moon because we don't know exact time, but pay attention to Pluto. And also, it's really interesting. Just pay attention to Pluto. The 4th house, maybe 4th house cusp sign is in Capricorn. So where Sirius Sun and transit Pluto are conjunct. And now Pluto has moved into Aquarius and is heading towards an opposition with Sirius natal Pluto. You know, that is in Leo, and Sirius natal Pluto in the I think it's in the ascendant, not ascendant line. It's a great opposition, I think. And this indicates that it will likely take a long time to establish a new form of governance in Syria, because this indicates that it will likely take a long time. And maybe I'd like to briefly provide some information about Syria, because so much has happened. So much has happened over these years. So let's focus on this geographically chart. There are three different administrations in Syria. The first is the Assad regime, and the second is the YPG groups, which can essentially be considered a terrorist organization. And the third is the opposition forces. So, which opposition forces which has now overthrown the Assad regime. Additionally, the Assad regime used chemical weapons. So at the time, US President Obama, you know, at that time, Obama stated that chemical weapons are our red line. No one can use them in war. Okay, and subsequently armed certain groups in Syria. And this in turn led to ISIS, stands for the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. In turn, led to ISIS intervening in the country. And ISIS is a separate organization trying to establish itself under this name. After that, so many events took place that it's impossible to explain them quickly here. But however, to briefly summarize, when we talk about Syria, we should list the countries involved during, so helps illustrate why this civil war is so significant. You know, the main countries involved are the United States, Russia, Iran, Israel, and also Turkey. Just imagine that these countries. And these countries have pursued their own policies regarding the Syrian civil war. And I believe this highlights the importance of the issue. Additionally, refugees, Syrians who fled the war, spread to European countries. Many attempted illegal crossings, so which inevitably affected Europe countries as well. And Turkey, on the other hand, has carried out numerous military operations to protect its borders. And Turkey deployed many soldiers to confront YPG-affiliated groups, which are considered terrorists and engaged in border wars. So maybe we can observe this charts. Now, you know, the Assad regime has ended, the last chart. And the Assad has fled to Russia, where he is in hiding. Naturally, many Syrian citizens in Turkey are now saying they plan to return to their home, their country. Here, I brought together three different charts, so we don't know the exact times of the other charts, so let's avoid using their ascendant NC and the moon placements. However, if you noticed, there is a Saturn-Mars conjunction in the 6th house, and the retrograde Mars in transit is also very close to the Sirius Pluto. So Sirius Pluto and North Node. And do you have any comments on this? If not, or
Yeah, feel free. Yes, Julia.
okay.
I was just going to say the Pluto Venus conjunction at 0 Aquarius, as we know, it's a hotspot degree that's kind of live,
Yeah.
from the Jupiter Saturn conjunction there back in 2020. So that's kind of interesting. Pluto's there for a while, but Venus kind of joining that is, significant with the freedom aspect or a new way forward. Yeah.
To a place that it's
Jolie,
impossible to explain. Yeah. Julia, thank you.
Jolie.
Julie?
I just wanted to comment a couple of pieces. First off, Assad's Saturn return, his Saturn is at 13 degrees Pisces.
Wow.
Oh,
Great
Paul
contribution.
was his Saturn return.
Wow.
So I found that absolutely extraordinary. I mean, it was partile. The other point I think that is interesting to make is if we think of Pluto as burning away conditioning, this idea of burning away the norm, that what you consider the norm, what you think is the norm. And so, in that Civil War chart, we see Pluto on Sirius sun, and there is that, wait a minute, no, this is not how we want to be living. And we've seen now how, through sanctions and whatnot, the Syrian people were really struggling, but Assad had this like fleet of luxury cars. So, there was this real, that Pluto on the nation's sun for the Civil War, I think there was real resentment, discontent, a feeling of why are you crushing us? And I feel, Pluto crushing in the sun. I don't know, that really stands out to me. But finally, that lineup of the moon, so Syria's natal moon, then you have the Syrian Civil War Mars, and now you have Saturn. But Saturn is in Pisces. So this idea that we're imagining a future institution, we're imagining what Syria is going to look like. And certainly Al-Jilani, I know he's got a new name now that he's not a terrorist anymore, but he's saying, no, you don't need to be afraid of us. And understandably, other people are saying, but wait a minute, you were associated with Al-Qaeda. You are associated with people who are fundamentalist. And people have noted that in the last couple of interviews, whenever he's had women around, he has asked them to cover their hair. I mean, quite frankly, I don't want to step on anyone's toes, but if a woman is willing to just put a scarf on her head, I don't see what the big deal is. But whatever, the point being, he's walking this really fine line between this is what I want Syria to be, this is who I'm trying to keep happy. I just feel like that's really encapsulated so well in that 3-chart setup that you have, Keenan. So thank you.
Wow,
thank you,
great
Jolie. Thank you, Julia.
contributions. Thank you so much. Great contributions. Yeah. And also Saturn return. Wow, that's a good point. Amazing point.
Yeah, that's well spot.
I also like the connection to, remember the out of bounds moons that are extreme at
Yeah.
28
Ah,
Gemini and Sagittarius. So the Civil War starting at when the nodes were there, and now we've got the moon sort of kind of and Neptune squaring that, all sort of disintegrating and pushing it out from, that place it was for so long, in war and, anyway, another chaos reigns, but whatever. Yes.
Definitely.
Yes.
oh, great. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Keenan.
And also a little,
Yes.
I think I created the composite chart for Turkey and Syria.
Oh, okay.
I can say that because the inner chart shows the composite and the outer chart represents the current transits, and specifically the date when the Assad regime collapsed. What do we see? The Mars retrograde is only 6 degrees, the composite charts Mars. So it's really interesting. It's truly a fascinating connection, I think. Considering all these observations, I would like to clearly state the following. How Syria will be governed is completely uncertain. And in the past, wars seem to have certain level of honor. They were often fought for better living conditions. The warriors or conquerors promised to bring justice, promised to bring and prosperity, to the lands, and they fought for. For example, let's talk about empires. It surely wasn't an easy task to conquer, and govern vast territories. Back then, wars were more like cultural battles. So today's wars are entirely driven by the need for raw materials, natural resources, and exploitations. Of course, this has always been a fundamental purpose of war. But in the last century, the goal seems to be solely about rendering a country powerless and leaving it in ruins. We have seen this happen in Afghanistan. So the country was neutralized. There was an intervention in terrorism, but no one asked what will happen to healthcare, what will happen to education or governance. They left the country to fend for itself. Now, we don't know what will happen in Syria's land. Israel might make a claim, or Russia could take a different approach. We will have to wait and see, but we need to keep a close watch on this region, and we should focus more on evaluating the charts. And thank you, everyone. Thank you for your patience and understanding as well. My dear cousin Rod, thank you so much for inviting me again.
Thank you. It's very interesting, especially before I handed the to Benson. I want to mention one thing. That Trump's praise about Turkey doing so well, we have to see which the state is kind of true, because Turkey's position since the Ukraine-Russian war, Turkey has an important position to allow the people in and out the Black Sea. And then now Syria is on another side. Well, Turkey has kind of a power, to be honest. Of course, instead they also receive people from Russia, people from Ukraine, people from Syria and the Middle East. That's another part of it. And then one thing I just noticed is that last time when the Pluto in Aquarius and the Neptune in Aries around 1533 to 1548 was the Ottoman Empire expanded to its extreme.
Wow.
We are going to have a fun in Turkey.
Our rules.
Yeah. Okay. So also Jolie mentioned there was a comment on the.
I couldn't read that.
Because I saw Jolie's comment is about 12 hours, Mars in a 12 hours. Oh yeah, that was a previous chat. Okay. Well, I think we have to speed up because Benson was here waiting for hours.
Sorry,
I'm really sorry. No, don't worry. I think, okay, Benson, are you ready?
Yes, of course. And let me show you the very first items, which is about it kind of a very common, Capricorn Ingress chart, that all the technical aspects of the chart that our speakers has done before. I just only single out several aspects in light of what actually happened in both places, Hong Kong and China. You can see on the left-hand side is a chart for China, and right side Hong Kong. You may find some kinds of similarities in terms of the China chart and Hong Kong chart in at least two aspects. The first aspect, you can see there is an opposition between the Saturn and the Moon for both charts between house 3, 4, and house 9 and 10. That's that part. The second aspect is quite similar, is another opposition aspect between Mars and Pluto between house number 2 and number 8. So this is actually in line with what happening in Hong Kong and China. Most people may realize that China's economy has been unstable for such a long time since the COVID-19, almost 2 years ago. And right now, the current leaders, Xi Jinping, tried to sort out that economic uncertainties in different ways, but the impact may not be so obvious. So in this aspect, Hong Kong also suffer because Hong Kong has been a part of China, and because after 2021, Hong Kong actually has been facing a China direct control, education, economy, and also the diplomacy. So right now, Hong Kong is no longer the Hong Kong before 2020. Hong Kong has been a part of China that how to put a helping hand to Russia, North Korea, and also Iran to engage some so-called underground transactions in high technology, in gold, and also a number of business starting in Hong Kong. So in this aspect, when I interpret both charts in light of what actually happened in Hong Kong and China, that interpretation has become meaningful in terms of what possible difficulties that both places will be facing. Especially we do realize that over maybe several weeks or even several months, the US government has been investigating that problem associated with Hong Kong and China, engaging some so-called illegal trade, immoral trade, between China and Russia, because the China actually has been a side of Russia in the war with Ukraine. So right now the US or even the EU actually impose different kinds of punishments over the company in Hong Kong and China. That's the reason why we do believe the spectrum in house number 9 has a very strong meaning that in Hong Kong and China, they actually are facing a kind of external pressure from US or even we call the world of democracy that tries to isolate or de-link or even disconnect with between the China, Hong Kong on the one side and the Western world on the other side because of the international relations seems to be a little bit tense. So the second aspect, of course, we focus on the domestic politics in Hong Kong and China. So for those who actually cared about what happened in China, we do know that, we realize that Xi Jinping has been in power, has been in control everything for such a long time. But it's quite regular to see that Xi Jinping facing a challenges, regardless this is a kind of rumor or this is kind of real things. But at least we do realize that the current government in Beijing is not able to manage their own domestic problems, like their kind of assassination of, like in September this year, there's assassinations of a Japanese boy in southern part of China in Shenzhen or in Guangzhou, I forget exact place. And also in China, instead of overthrowing the government, people choose to kill the others in order to release their anger or release their pressure in face of a very tense situation, economic situation and public situation in China. Of course, there's number of very small scale, I would say some responses that how the people in China are not happy about the current government, which is not able to solve the economic issues. So that kind of a very hidden, perhaps very underground kinds of struggle between the citizen and also the government actually have been in place for such a long time, but this is actually underreported by the media because of number restriction that circulating what happened in China. But in Hong Kong, we do have a term called soft resistance that the Hong Kong people are not happy about the current government because the government is not serve the people's interests, but only serve the interests of the the Beijing authorities. So in this aspect, they also show the similar kinds of features in terms of how House number 2 and 8 that opposition has been in place. Like in Hong Kong, people just like in Hong Kong, people share with me that right now in the past, approaching the Christmas and New Year holidays, and people will really happy about the approaching of that festive atmosphere that they comes and do the shopping on the street in Hong Kong, the shopping mall. But right now, after maybe 9 p.m. in Hong Kong, no one on the street, almost no one on the street. All the shop had to close earlier because there's no one on the street to buy things, to have food. People would instead they go to mainland China, go to Shenzhen, go to Guangzhou for shopping because it's much cheaper in terms of price, because the renminbi, the Chinese money is devaluing in face of the future uncertainties that Donald Trump may impose a very heavy traffic up to 60% over the products produced in China. So in my interpretation, that both charts are really meaningful, especially try to in line with what happened in Hong Kong and China. At this stage, any problem, if there's no any question problems or even issue, I will jump to the both the chart that the level chart and the Ingress chart that put together. One exciting point that actually has been happening and will be happening in the next few years is, of course, about that Proto actually will come through, this house number 12 to house number 1, that we can see the power of Proto on China, especially about the issue about the moon, including very lower birth rate. The women in China are not willing to give on the baby. And there is a group, this is real things, saying that recently there is a foreign mission to China to share their experience about the how to encourage more women to give birth of the baby. And I don't know, I'm supposedly, I think it is the Fox News, but this is true. And one Chinese officer, they raised the question during the seminar, maybe just like right now, how to encourage more women to give more baby. Because right now, China, instead of there's a huge population, 1.3 billion, but that figures may underestimate. There's a very serious problem of aging population. And also, there are very low birth rate, not only China, but also Hong Kong. So that officer want to seek the advice from the experts about how to encourage more women to give born the baby. But of course, in China, people tend to be a kind of self-resistant that instead of having family, getting married, they having a pet, or even having a very lazy life because they cannot see the future. So that Proto actually conjunct with the moon has the first meaning. The second meaning, of course, is the people trying to think about how to survive under that uncertainty for such a long time, and there's no room for have a hope for the future. So if you take a look, that Pluto will hand around that conjunction with the moon in China for maybe at least how many years? maybe at least 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and I don't know what will be looking like in China. And second aspect is about the economy, especially that I would say the situation of China economy is getting uncertain because as I mentioned, and you can see house number 2, especially right now. I forget. Okay, so you see the Chiron actually conjunct with the Nox, and people will think whether that economic issue will be a very, very important driving force for the possibility of change in China in the future. But at least that economic situation in China has makes the people or even the leader has no way to how to deal with that critical situation, especially right now in the next year, when Donald Trump will impose a really severe measure towards China in terms of the traffic that I mentioned. And other aspect that I can see, people would make think about whether there's a possibility of social unrest in China, especially approaching the Lunar New Year in January, towards the end of January next year. And you can see the Mars in house 6 and 7, and they will come through that this line in saying that there will be a kind of a approaching the conjunction in the future. And I don't know when that conjunction will take place between 2 Marses, but calculating the possible time maybe in the first half of next year. And I don't know what's going on. Maybe it relates to a much more large scale movement, or people will think about in house number 7 is associated with the war with foreign powers. Will associate with a further intensification of a violence or even a kind of fighting in the internal way, and what scale and what aspect. But at least in the future, especially when that Mars will conjunct with China, that conjunction of the Pluto and Mars, and I get that uncertainty with much more obvious, not only within the territories of China, but also outside of China. But because of time limit, I want to jump to the Hong Kong part. For the Hong Kong part, one obvious point is that the house number 2, the moon, and also I forget this one. Okay, maybe let me jump this one first. Maybe the Chiron and the Saturns conjunctions. So we are maybe facing a possibility of unhappy situation and that pressure. Even though right now in Hong Kong, there's no large-scale protests or even rallies or demonstration to be in places at this stage. But that very painful situation, some people share with me a pieces of information about the index of happiness in Hong Kong is lowest at the lower levels. That the atmosphere, the environment, people are not happy staying in Hong Kong. And other possible aspect that about Hong Kong is recently there's a change in a top leadership or top leaders, and of course people will see in house number 11, especially talk about the council, about the parliament, and right now that's because the government, there's no difference between the lawmaking body or the executive bodies. So we can be seeing a possibility that that Pluto in house number 11 imply the possible changes associated with the top government leader, or even right now the lawmaking representative are really feared about whether they cannot complete the whole terms of their appointments. So maybe I check the time, maybe I hand over to Ro to see whether there will be any further observation or other members within the panel with other
Yeah.
questions about what will be happening in Hong Kong and China.
Thank you, Benson. Any comment, Jolie? You want to make any comment?
Oh my gosh, you always read my mind, Rod. I do want to the handover chart with the Capricorn Ingress. I was just really struck by the Capricorn Ingress Mars in the 5th house on the handover charts Venus, and it makes me think, 5th house arts entertainment, but also the trial of Jimmy Lai
Yeah.
that's happening at
Oh,
the
yeah.
moment.
Right.
And how, I don't know if that somehow brings things into the spotlight, but I just thought that Mars conjunct Venus was really striking for me. And then the only other point that I was, because I was looking at the same chart, but Benson, but in whole signs, and I thought it was really interesting
This one?
because,
This one?
sorry?
This chart?
Yeah, this chart. Yeah. So that Mars is, that retrograde Mars is coming to Venus there in the 5th house in Leo. So that just made me think of the trial, because I just think that is, so visible, especially because Jimmy Lai is also a British citizen. So, that, yeah, I just think that's really interesting. Side note, I do teach at a boarding school, and we have had more and more children from Hong Kong, more Hong Kong families that are moving to Britain because they are so unhappy with things there. And they're taking advantage of the UK's offer. But your point about the streets being empty, I have some friends who recently went back to Hong Kong, and we used to hang out in all the places, Wan Chai and whatnot, and they said it is a ghost town now, which is just so sad to me. So yeah, just wanted to pick up on that point.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it is. Yeah, I haven't been to Hong Kong for a long time too. I do used to like a Jolie and Benson say, the street, the high street, usually is like toward midnight. You still see people walk around and then play around. Still, and then now when you hear about after 9 o'clock, no one on the street, you're just like, ouch. That is very, very. I think what China did or the Hong Kong government did is, wow, amazing. What should I say? It's unbelievable. It's
Oh,
unbelievable.
will you plan to visit Hong Kong again in next year to try to feel what's happening in Hong Kong?
Not. I passed.
You are not a risky person compared with me.
By hosting you, I think I should be more careful. They want to ask me where do you live, right? Anyway, I think they already know. Okay, well, thank you, Benson. And
Good question.
well, I would just very quickly talk about Taiwan situation, just one chart, okay? And I'm going to share this chart. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. Very quickly, this is this Capricorn Ingress in Taiwan. Very similar like China and Hong Kong. We all have the Neptune very close to MCIC. But this is not the fun part. Well, I would say the current situation in Taiwan is first, during the Mars stationary retrograde period, not many people heard about that. Is China has a kind of military drill and send all the boats from their military police boat to the military navy boat around Taiwan, close Taiwan. Last time they did it was 2022 when Nancy Pelosi visited Taipei. And this time, we don't know, but they didn't say a word. That's very tricky. They didn't say a word this time. They just do it. They didn't say a word. And the people say they are demonstrate to show Trump and the United States and the West country, we can control it now. Whether it can really control or not, we don't know, because the U.S. military consultation, some make a report say, no, they are still far away. They still, because the corruption. That's possible, but don't underestimate it about their power too. Which another way, I doubt what happened in Taiwan is, I don't think they really need a military action. What happened is, it's even like because in Taiwan there's still few percentage, let me say, around 30-ish or 20% of people who support uniting with China. They usually unhappy towards government to gain a lot of votes now. That used to, we call it KMT nationalism, which was a flee from the China in 1948. Now they want to go back. So they control the parliament at this moment. So the pro-independent government cannot really do anything. They even trying to cut the budget for Navy. Have you seen just what just happens around the Taiwan, and this turn they want to cut budget of Navy? It's just like, are you crazy? Are you crazy? And you can see that Mars ruler 11th house, the Mars ruler 11th house opposite Pluto with the 8th house. That was the situation of Taiwan. The parliament, for example, it's like we heard about the South Korea. South Korea government, president wasn't happy about what happened in the parliament. So he imposed the martial law. And he accused those parliament and parliament leader are a betrayer who supports North Korea. To be honest, if you want to use the same standard, you can say exactly word. I didn't say Taiwan president should do that. I would say you can say exactly word is the president and the parliament belong to different party, and they against each other. So but in Taiwan, it's really what happened is that everything been blocked in the parliament. So that was the one thing not many people heard about it. But if you put two charts together, if I put the Capricorn chart here and go to the 1911, the ROC chart, and you will see Neptune. That is like we are not really sure where we're going. We are not really sure where, and the Uranus is on the moon Pluto. Okay, that is a pretty interesting. And Mars is on the midpoint of the sun and moon. So I think Taiwan should be, well, to be honest, in one way, Taiwan should be more careful. But in another way, if people are not happy with government and vote for the pro-China party, what can we do? Yes.
Sorry, Rod. The one point I did want to make about the Neptune North Node.
Yes.
Is that it's in contra Anticia.
Yes.
So in all the Ingress charts, right? So we are at a time of maximum delusion.
Yes.
Maybe imagination as well. Like, where could we go from here? How could it be better? But there really is that, exactly as Keenan and Benson and everyone else is saying, that this idea of like, everything feels so uncertain. It's so foggy. You don't know where to put your foot down. You can't see the earth. So I find that absolutely fascinating. But with regards to the Chinese military exercises, I was listening to John Mearsheimer, and he was saying that the one thing we have to keep in mind is that an amphibious assault for anybody is super difficult. All we have to look is at D-Day to see how an amphibious assault from water to land is so difficult. Yeah. And so really at the end of the day, the Taiwan Strait is a big deal, because it doesn't matter if China can sit there and circle it with boats, it can't make landfall. quite so
Yeah.
easily. So that's one point. And then also, I think China is at a place now where it does need to start thinking more seriously about how it is presenting itself to the world, what world opinion is. They can see how world opinion is tanking on certain countries at the moment. And then one other point is going back to South Korea. I think that what was happening there was you had a leader who was having a lot of domestic issues.
Yeah.
And so how do I solve my domestic issues? I know, I'm going to call martial law. Right? And of course the opposition was like, they're in power in the parliament. They're like, no, we're not going to stand for that. And there was a very powerful picture of one of the women MPs
Yes.
holding the
Yes.
gun
Yeah.
in front of the house. So I think that really what we're seeing now from many people, many countries, I should say, is there are domestic issues that we are not willing to face. That Moon Saturn opposition is domestic institutions not willing to face the public. I think Keenan said this earlier as well. They're not willing to look at the response to the alleged. I hate the way the mainstream media is dropping alleged. The alleged killer of that health insurance CEO has garnered so much empathy and sympathy and raw feeling. And you know what institutions are doing? They're opening a hotline for CEOs who are scared. Excuse me,
Yeah.
do you do that for kids going to school? It's in madness. It's insanity. So I think, it's interesting where we have domestic issues that are being ignored for the sake of foreign, okay, what's going on in foreign policy? Let's look good there, and it's being echoed again and again and again across everything we've seen here today. So, yeah.
Thank you, Jolie. I really enjoy your deep insight. It is so nice to have you here. Also, today you are not present any chart, but I'm really looking for next time to have you to present something because your knowledge is really, really rich. Thank you, everyone. I mean, we are a little bit running nearly 2 hours. I'm so sorry for everyone, but I hope we all enjoy it. Thank you, Julia. We have to leave earlier because it was quite late in Australia. That's why we are coming this early. And thank you, Keenan, and thank you, Benson, and thank you, Jolie. I mean, you guys are amazing. I really enjoy doing this with you, and I really looking forward to come back in the Aries Ingress, and that's going to be fun. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Julie. Thank you, Benson, and thank Kina, and thanks, everyone. Stay with us, and then, our next Worldscope, regular Worldscope will come back on the 10th of January. Let me double check the date. I think it should be 10th. Yeah, 10th of January on Friday evening. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Bye. Oh,
Bye.
Happy Christmas.
Happy
Yeah, to everyone. Happy
holidays.
solstice. Happy Christmas. Happy New Year. Yeah.